Hey, what's up everyone? Dragon back again, here to tell you that you should be watching The Howling. So The Howling is a 1981 horror film directed by Joe Dante and starring Dee Wallace. Yes, before I go on, I know some of you are probably going to point this out, that The Howling is actually based on a novel, The Howling, which subsequently had two sequels that were had nothing to do with the sequels to the films. And the reason I'm focusing on the movie, well, first and foremost, I have not read the book, but I plan on to. And two, the film, from what I've come to understand, differs a lot from the book. The basic skeleton of the book exists within the film, but from what I pretty much understand, the writers of the film even said that the first order of business was to basically chuck out the book. They just basically kept a few components, but ultimately told their own story with it, and it is that story that I am focusing on in this video. So when I do read the book, if I find it, captivating in its own way and really feel that, or, find the story within the book that I would like to talk about on this channel, I will do a You Should Be Reading for it. But again, the movie and the book, as I've come to understand, are two different things. So even if I do end up talking about the book, it'll be ultimately be for a different reason that I'm talking about the film. So with that out of the way, The Howling, the movie. So the film basically follows a news reporter in Los Angeles, played by Dee Wallace, named Karen White, who was essentially kind of doing a sting operation, if you will, to track down a nymphomaniac serial killer, a rapist serial killer named Eddie, who is essentially raping, women and then brutally murdering them. Emphasis on brutally. She finds him in a porn shop where she goes in the back to one of the little porn screening rooms. Back in the old days when people had to go to places to acquire pornography. This is in the Stone Age, kids, long before the internet. And where she is confronted, and before he can, do the dastardly deed, he is gunned down by the police. She basically is essentially traumatized by the experience, rightfully so, because you're essentially confronted by a rapist murderer who was planning on raping and murdering you. And, is suggested by her psychiatrist, or I think, not psychologist, I believe he's a psychiatrist in the film there, to go up to the colony, which is kind of this retreat that he has, where he has a lot of patients and people there who go there for varying reasons and whatnot, basically kind of get away. It's kind of like I don't want to say like a health resort, but just kind of a good vibes resort up in Northern California near the beach, where people kind of just unwind, chill out, just kind of compose themselves and just kind of have a good time. And her and her fiance, or her husband, go up there for that reason alone. And there she's going through her treatment and kind of, trying to figure out what happened. Something about the experience with Eddie just is really struck her. Not just for the obvious reasons of what he was there to do, but something about him wasn't right. Like when she has to try to recall the memory of seeing him. She can see him, but she can't see him because there was something about when she saw him. Something was happening that she couldn't make sense of, couldn't process. Like she saw it, but her mind couldn't make sense of what she was seeing. Therefore, she saw him, but she couldn't see him. And then basically, shortly thereafter, her husband is attacked by a large animal. Meanwhile, other members of the news team are kind of going up there to investigate, and they basically discern that Eddie was from the colony. Eddie is from there, that there's something going on at the colony. And I guess this is minor spoiler territory, but if you know anything about the movie, or you watch a trailer of the movie, or you've just gleaned anything, even reading it, I think in the back of the old VHS box or the DVD or the Blu-ray one, pretty much kind of gives at least this much away, is that there are werewolves in the colony, and that Eddie himself was, a werewolf. Hence the title of the film and the book, The Howling. And it basically kind of the story unraveling of what is going on up there, her connection to Eddie and the colony, and how it all kind of comes to a head. And essentially, from what I gather, this is where the film really differs from the book, where the book takes place, and again, in a town in California called Drago, where, again, the town is comprised of werewolves. This film, the film seems to focus on more about the struggle to adapt and cope in the modern world. Whereas from, again, what I've gathered from the book, the werewolves seem to have kind of had a good thing going from this town that for all intents and purposes was they were pulling off the ruse, so to speak. Whereas here, you could basically find out that by a character who I will not spoil, this colony is essentially this character's attempt at bringing the werewolves into modern society, for they have always kind of hunted humans, they've always kind of viewed humans as prey, but as the world is progressing and modernizing, it is going to be increasingly difficult for them to continue on, because once upon a time, humans were just kind of scattered, or scared, creatures living in villages with, torches and pitchforks. Now humans have guns and planes and tanks and bombs, and the werewolves have to lead much more secretive lives because they're essentially their best weapon against human beings is their anonymity, is that people know that there's no such things as werewolves, and that's what keeps them safe, because the world is not looking for them, because as far as the world's concerned, there's nothing to look forward to. But if we found that werewolves were real, we would just send in a bunch of, Black Ops Navy SEALs with, high-powered rifles and machine guns loaded with silver bullets, and that would be that. As you find out in this film, that yes, silver is the only thing that can hurt them or kill them. And this film does do something very interesting where it dispels the myth of pop culture that werewolves can only turn on a full moon, which was something that was developed by Universal Pictures for the Wolf Man. Prior to that, the mythology of werewolves is always that someone who is a werewolf, traditionally that most werewolves, once you became a werewolf, you could not change backwards. Once you were the werewolf, you were a werewolf, and that was what you are. But some mythologies that do incorporate the notion of shape-shifting, at least have always said that, well, if you can shape-shift into a werewolf, you can shape-shift back at will. And that's kind of what this film introduces, the werewolf being able to turn back and forth at will, daylight or night. Something that does, again, different from the book, because I know in the book they describe the werewolves as only being able to turn at night. And when they do turn, they resemble traditional werewolves, where they are wolves that are larger. They look larger, more muscular, like more powerful wolves, but they are still wolves. They are quadrupeds, where this film kind of depicts them as more your classic Hollywood werewolf, where it's a anthropomorphic man-like wolf, the long muzzle on two legs, the big body. But aside from that, they basically, werewolves can turn back and forth at will, day or night. They are in complete control of their lycanthropy, save for only the aggression that comes with it. And that's basically what this film is really trying to tell. It is essentially a culture, if you will. The werewolves are organized, they're intelligent, they're sentient, they are a culture that is essentially being swallowed up by another. It is kind of a coming of the modern age, and basically almost a bit of a generational story of how we are sometimes, caught off guard by how quickly the world can change, and we become so assured of ourselves in the way we are based on how things are around us that we become almost too specialized, that as long as things remain the same, we will be fine. But what happens when the world changes? What happens when the world starts changing rapidly and dramatically around us and we're struggling to keep up? And this is really, oddly enough, beside being just a cool, horror werewolf story, it is a story about kind of generational differences and how, difficult it is to adapt and change. And sometimes when people do try to adapt, they fail and instantly revert back to kind of the way they used to do things, only to kind of discover that it is ultimately their downfall, it is their doom. And, spoilers a little bit in the story, but that's kind of what the werewolves learn in this story, is that, going back to the way things were will ultimately be their demise, because there's a reason why they were being pushed to change in the first place. There was a reason why they were essentially, the wolves were being domesticated rather than hunting humans. They were raising livestock in which they could, kill for food and slaughter. Basically, again, domesticating them, because they're this individual is telling them that if you continue on the way they are, humans are now organized. Humans are more dangerous than we are. They are more dangerous than we ever were, and they are more dangerous than we ever could be. They have used technology to eliminate any threat the natural world could put forth. So once upon a time, we were apex predators and the stuff of nightmares to them because we were these powerful, aggressive, deadly predators. Now a 10-year-old with a handgun with a silver bullet can kill a 7-foot werewolf in one shot. It has not just leveled the playing field, it has completely tipped it over in the prey's favor. So anonymity and their werewolves' ability to coexist with humans now, as opposed to lording over them, is the only chance they really have at survival. Because once humans catch on that they're real, that's it. Humans will do what they always do when confronted with a threat. They will eliminate it without mercy. And that's kind of what this story is about. These werewolves, essentially, their failure to assimilate, despite best efforts. Their inability to overcome their primal urges, their aggressive tendencies, if you will. The Eddie's moving to Los Angeles and trying to assimilate, but essentially becoming a serial rapist and killer because his urges to indulge himself in physical pleasures and feed upon what he deems as his prey was too much for him. Whereas, in the colony, the werewolves essentially are free to do as they please. They can rape whoever they want and kill whoever they want. They are above them. They are beyond them. Therefore, they do not see it as them doing that to an individual. The humans are there for them to do whatever they so please, to indulge any behavior, desire, urge that they have, because as far as they're concerned, that's fine. They're human. That's what humans exist for us to indulge our most savage instincts. But in modern society, that does not go unnoticed and that does not go unpunished. So that's kind of what this story is about. It is the changing of the times. It is the desperate need to be able, not just to willingness to adapt, but the ability to adapt, to overcome your own instincts, if you will. That which made werewolves superior in the past is what's destroying them now. It's their inability to be put in modern society and to hide because they cannot control their urges. They cannot not be what they are. And there's a great line in this film where one of the werewolves said, "You can't tame what is meant to be wild. It's just not natural." And that's true. Unfortunately, when species can't adapt, they go extinct. And unfortunately, the film franchise of this didn't go extinct after the first movie, and we were left with a series of films that, in my personal opinion, did not do the original film justice. They do not feel like worthy successors. A couple of them had some good ideas in it, but ultimately they all kind of just felt like sequels, unfortunately. Again, that's my opinion. You guys may have watched the other films. I think they're fantastic, or just enjoyed them for what they are. Curiously enough, The Howling 4 is basically an adaptation of the book. It is the closest adaptation of the book. So if you kind of want to see what the book would look like as a movie, The Howling 4 is pretty much there. And I know some people even say that, in terms of film quality, the fourth film is probably the closest one to the first one. But in terms of the film itself, that the first one kind of, the first one is the movie to watch. And came out the same year as American Werewolf in London. And while American Werewolf in London is very famous for having that great werewolf transformation, being all practical effects, this film has an equally wonderful werewolf transformation, and dare I say, a better one. That's my opinion, but I actually think the transformation in this film is better than American Werewolf. They're on par. I mean, it's arguable, but that's not to say they're equal. I think it's the transformation in Howling is scarier. I think the end result creature is scarier, whereas the werewolf in American Werewolf in London probably resembles more of the werewolves you would see in the Howling book, a larger, more powerful wolf, whereas the creature in the Howling is more of a monster. It's more terrifying, but doing a great job of showing what you can do with practical effects in a pre-digital era. But yeah, I've always actually thought, in my personal opinion, I was always more taken with the transformation in the Howling, because I think it's a little scarier and a little more gnarly and nasty looking. But again, that goes more towards the nature and style of the Howling. I think American Werewolf in London is more, it's a scary film, but it's a little bit more comedic, whereas the Howling is a bit more darker and a bit more horror-esque in that sense, but I'm not detracting from American Werewolf in London, and I'll probably actually be talking about American Werewolf in London on this channel. So for those of you guys who think I'm hating on it, I'm not. Calm down. But anyway, The Howling. That's kind of my takeaway from it. It's a story of changing of the times and how we all have to struggle to catch up, and if we can, that's the end of us. So, The Howling, have you seen it? If so, what are your thoughts? If not, I'll put some links in the description section below where you can check it out. Come back, give me some of your thoughts. And if you have read the book, feel free to give me some of your thoughts in comparison, because from what I've been reading about the books, they are very interesting. And while different than the movie, they seem interesting in their own right. So I'm very much looking forward to reading them just as a cool werewolf story, even if it bears very little resemblance to the film. Because, like I said, I mean, if a film or a television series is a poor adaptation of the source material, then the question becomes, okay, fine. But does it work on its own? Does it work as a movie? Even if it's not like the book, is it still a good movie? And I always enjoy The Howling, and I think it's a very good movie. And if it's not like the book, I still think it does a great job of telling a very kind of poignant story. So, well, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!